The presentation of anarchism as social philosophy which aims at the emancipation, economic, social, political, and spiritual of the human race. The emancipation.
Anarchist Essays is brought to you by Loughborough University's Anarchism Research Group. For more information on the ARG, see the link in the show notes or follow us on Twitter at ARGLBORO.
Envisioning Abolition. Back to black. How can the ideas of early anarchists and libertarian socialists help us make sense of contemporary abolitionist debates? And why do their critiques of punishment, power, and inequality still resonate so strongly today? That question sits at the heart of the book Envisioning Abolition. The volume digs into the long, often forgotten history of penal abolitionist thought, tracing it back not to the late 20th century, as many people assume, but to the late 18th and 19th centuries. Long before abolition became a key word in criminology or social movements, anarchists and early libertarian socialists were already asking whether prisons, punishment, and state violence were not only ineffective, but morally indefensible. This podcast serves as both an introduction to some of the key themes of the book and of the 5 following episodes of anarchist essays over the coming weeks, which are summaries of the chapters in Envisioning Abolition. This introductory episode is delivered by myself, David Gordon Scott, and Emma Bell, who co-edited Envisioning Abolition. In March 2026, the book was published along with its sister volume, Abolitionist Voices, which explores the multiple and interconnected traditions of penal abolition, in paperback by Bristol University Press. The main aim of Envisioning Abolition is to recover some of the lost, forgotten, or unheard voices of penal abolitionists in the past. Envisioning Abolition shows us that abolitionism is not some radical novelty, but a deep and persistent current within libertarian socialism. A tradition that blends the egalitarian aims of socialism with the anti-authoritarian commitments of anarchism. Whilst it is important to recognise the divergences in libertarian socialist thought since the early 19th century, and the significant tensions that exist between the different traditions that have emerged since that time, the shared, long-standing commitment to penal abolitionism transcends some of these differences. In other words, the multi-rooted and interconnected nature of penal abolitionist thought historically brings together red and black, not as rivals, but as collaborators in a shared struggle for human freedom.
So, what exactly is libertarian socialism? At its core, libertarian socialism is a non-authoritarian form of socialism. It rejects the idea that human emancipation can be delivered by a powerful state imposing order from above. Instead, it insists that socialism must be rooted in freedom, participation, mutual aid, and cooperation. This tradition draws from multiple sources. Anarchists like William Godwin, Peter Kropotkin, Emma Goldman, Enrico Malatesta, and Leo Tolstoy, but also early socialists such as Robert Owen, and William Morris. Despite their differences, they shared deep concerns about hierarchy, domination, coercion, and the corrupting effects of concentrated power. Libertarian socialism thrives precisely because it blends traditions, individual freedom with collective responsibility, mutualism with equality, autonomy with solidarity. This is where red and black meet: socialism's commitment to social justice and anarchism's refusal of authoritarian power. And penal abolition becomes one of the clearest places where this convergence happens.
Other thinkers discussed in Envisioning Abolition, punishment is not a technical problem to be fixed. It's a political and ethical problem. Take William Godwin, one of the earliest abolitionist thinkers. He argued that law doesn't prevent violence, it reproduces it. Legal institutions, by protecting private property and elite interests, generate crime rather than reduce it. Prisons, he famously warned, are seminaries of vice, places that train people in harm rather than reform them. This critique was echoed again and again. William Morris, after witnessing police violence during Bloody Sunday in London in 1887, realised that the law's promise of protection was a myth. The law didn't shield the vulnerable, it disciplined them. For Morris, law was quite simply an instrument of class domination. Across the Atlantic, Emma Goldman, Alexander Berkman, as well as socialists like Clarence Darrow and Eugene V. Debs, reached similar conclusions after witnessing the brutal repression of workers during events like the Haymarket Affair and the Pullman strike. Again and again, they saw how punishment was deployed not to protect society, but to protect power. What emerges here is a core abolitionist insight that still resonates today. Criminal law focuses relentlessly on the harms of the powerless while ignoring the harms of the powerful.
These early libertarian socialist thinkers were also united in their critique of inequality. They rejected the liberal fantasy of equality before the law, pointing out that unjust laws applied equally still produce injustice. As early anarchists repeatedly argued, a system that treats everyone the same while ignoring massive inequalities of wealth and power doesn't deliver justice, it entrenches domination. Thinkers like Enrico Malatesta, Enrico Ferrigori, and the Spanish anarchists argued that poverty, exploitation, and social degradation were the real sources of what gets labelled as crime. Gori memorably claimed that the seed of crime is born from the property system. In that sense, prisons don't solve crime, they manage the fallout of inequality. This connects directly to contemporary penal abolitionist thinking. Today, prisons remain filled with people who are poor, racialized, mentally unwell, or socially excluded. Meanwhile, corporate crimes, environmental destruction, and state violence remain largely untouched by penal law. That fundamental structure and ideological mystification of power hasn't changed.
Early penal critics also rejected simplistic notions of equality. Instead, they argued for equity, meeting people according to their needs. The libertarian socialist principle, from each according to their ability, to each according to their need, wasn't just about distributing wealth. It was also about responding to harms in ways that recognize human difference. Prison, however, embodies the opposite logic. It offers a one-size-fits-all response, the equal deprivation of liberty, regardless of personal history, context, or capacity for change. Anarchists and libertarian socialists saw this as not only unjust, but absurd. How can a system based on uniform suffering possibly address complex social and emotional harm? That critique lands with force today, when prisons still operate as blunt instruments incapable of care, healing, or meaningful accountability.
These early visions and ideas of penal abolition were also united in their commitment to freedom. But this isn't a shallow, individualistic freedom. It's freedom made real through equality and social support. For thinkers like Malatesta and Kropotkin, coercion was fundamentally incompatible with genuine freedom. The criminal law relies on coercion by design: threats, force, confinement. Even when legal, coercion always raises moral questions because it violates autonomy and dignity. This leads to a crucial distinction between negative freedom, freedom from oppression, and positive freedom, the ability to live a meaningful, flourishing life. Penal abolition, in this sense, has never been just about removing prisons. From its earliest inception, it has been about creating the social conditions where people don't need them. Interestingly, some early libertarian socialists like Morris believed that in an egalitarian society, moral education would replace coercion, not through fear, but through shared responsibility. Freedom, for them, was inseparable from responsibility to others.
If coercion is rejected, what takes its place? The answer for libertarian socialists is mutual aid and solidarity. Peter Kropotkin famously challenged the idea that competition drives human progress. Instead, he argued that cooperation was the true engine of evolution. Societies flourish not when people dominate each other, but when they support one another. This insight shaped abolitionist thinking about harm. Rather than asking, how do we punish? Socialists and anarchists asked, how do we repair, support, and prevent? Thinkers like Robert Owen, Tolstoy, Carpenter, and St. John imagined communities where belonging and care reduced harm more effectively than fear ever could. The great anarchist thinker Proudhon, who experienced prison firsthand, went even further. He argued that punishment had nothing to do with justice, only vengeance. True justice, he insisted, meant reparations, dialogue, and restoring social harmony, not inflicting suffering. Modern abolitionists echo this approach through restorative and transformative justice mutual aid networks, and community-based responses to harm.
Another powerful thread running through the volume is the insistence that justice is an ethical question before it is a legal one. Godwin, Malatesta, and Kropotkin all argued that morality imposed by authority is inferior to morality developed collectively. Needs-based justice, not desert-based punishment, was the ethical foundation of a humane society. This helps explain the fierce abolitionist critique of prisons. Prisons don't heal harm, they amplify it. As multiple contributors to this volume note, prisons have long been described as schools or universities of crime, institutions that degrade, brutalize, and isolate. Tolstoy's opposition to the death penalty is particularly striking here. He argued that state killing was morally worse than individual murder because it was carried out coldly, bureaucratically, and in the name of justice itself. That critique still reverberates wherever the state claims moral authority to destroy lives.
So why does all of this matter today? Because we are living through an era of punitive common sense. Despite decades of evidence showing that prisons fail, they continue to expand. Social problems are increasingly treated as criminal problems, and insecurity is routinely met with punishment rather than care. Envisioning abolition reminds us that there is another tradition, a tradition that refutes this logic. It offers a framework where abolition isn't naive idealism, but a coherent political project grounded in ethics, equality, and freedom. Penal abolitionism today is not only multivocal, expressing different ethical positions, but also has multiple roots. What is referred to in the associated book Abolitionist Voices as the abolitionist rhizome. The long history of penal abolitionist thought and sentiments brings together anarchists, Marxists, and democratic socialists. Even where important disagreements remain, especially around the role of the state, there is shared ground in rejecting the power to punish and opposing the violence of incarceration. So yes, we must go back to Black and recover the lost anarchist voices and place them very much at the heart of abolitionist debates today. But abolitionism must wear both red and black. It draws strength from libertarian socialism's demands for justice and anarchism's refusal of domination. Together, they offer not just critique, but possibility. The thinkers reviewed in Envisioning Abolition didn't believe harm could be erased, but they did believe it could be addressed without cruelty. Their answer was always more solidarity, deeper cooperation, and ethical responsibility. In dark times, they remind us, enlightened thinking matters most. The following associated episodes in anarchist essays all provide further evidence of the centrality of anarchist ideas informing modern-day abolitionist thought. They encourage us to imagine justice without cages, safety without violence, and freedom without fear. And perhaps most importantly, they remind us that abolitionism isn't about abandoning responsibility. It's about finally taking it seriously.
Thank you for listening. To help others find anarchist essays, please rate and review us wherever you find your podcasts. And if you're interested in anarchist ideas, why not check out the journal Anarchist Studies? For over 20 years, Anarchist Studies has been publishing original research on the history, theory, and practice of anarchism. For more information, visit www.lwbooks.co.uk/anarchist-studies.